listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Welcome along to the Straight to Video podcast. Really appreciate you listening in. On today's show, I am happy to welcome along a guy from one of my favourite bands of the past year or so as I speak to Andrew Ricks of the UK power pop band The Stayawakes, who have just released their brand new album Pop Dreams, and damn, it's a bit of a monster, believe me. Now, I got to know Andrew and his band in, I guess, a kind of odd way. I wasn't recommended the band by anyone or stumbled on them through a video or Spotify playlist or anything like that. In fact, anyone who knows me will know I'm still a big fan of VHS tapes and collect the old, what we call big box style you used to get from the video shop. I'm part of a few trading pages on Facebook and sell the odd tape or two, and after selling an old copy of Clockwork Orange, I got a message to say thank you for the tape, which was from today's guest, Andrew. I think he might have had like a guitar in the profile photo or something, so I checked out his page and saw a link to his band, and damn, they were great. It's not very often you find bands here in the UK who sound just like the kind of American power pop bands I loved from the mid-90s and beyond. These guys have a great vibe of the band Ash, but also so much of what I love about Fountains of Wayne, the Gin Blossoms, the Posies, basically all the good stuff, so I was all in. Get this too, they have an album which is called Dogs and Cats Living Together, which some of you might know as a quote from the classic film Ghostbusters. These guys just kept ticking all the boxes. If you enjoy this chat and like the sound of the band, then please head on over to thestayawakes.com or on Facebook and Twitter at simply @thestayawakes. So here we go with my chat with Andrew Ricks, singer and guitarist from The Stayawakes. So it doesn't have to be any like particular music related stuff, but what are some of your earliest childhood memories? Did you grow up in and around Portsmouth, or is that somewhere you've moved to?
Kind of, Hampshire. So I grew up on the Isle of Wight, raised in Cowes, Isle of Wight, which is known for sailing mainly. Pretty sleepy town. You've got 14 pubs and no music scene to speak of.
How long was you there for?
Pretty much until I moved off. I went to university at 18. Yeah, I tried to get off as much as possible in my teenage years, literally because there was so little music happening.
Right.
It was fine. It was, a nice place to grow up, I guess.
Is it quite a tourist area with it being Isle of Wight?
It was traditionally massively before people got flights. It was where everyone went for the holiday. So if you speak to anyone in my parents' generation, they all went to the Isle of Wight for their school trips and things like that. So people mainly know it for like going on a school trip, I think.
I guess you came along right at the end of the 70s then, or was it like 1980?
It was 1979.
Yeah. So what were some of your like, early hobbies and interests as a kid? There's obviously lots of links to 80s pop culture surrounding the whole band. Is that mainly from you, or is it a mix of all of you?
All of us, really, especially Jimmy's very much a big fan of John Hughes, his movies, as am I. And I think we all probably spent too much time in video shops growing up. I know I did. Got home from school and I wanted to go down the video shop, really not to rent videos, just to hang out, I think, and see if I could get some posters or some like boxes or just to hang out.
Did you ever snag any in-store displays?
Not in-store displays. I got a nice big picture of Cyborg, Van Damme movie, and some other things.
What was your local one? Was it an independent one before all the chains kicked in?
There was an independent one, which was called Hamilton's Video, and it was on the High Street in Cowes. And I remember my dad taking me there. I think he must have known the owner or something. I've got vivid memories of seeing boxes like Hellraiser, probably the early Nightmare on Elm Street covers, and just thinking, what is this, and not being able to rent them.
Was that by parents' rule or the video shop rule?
For sure, parents' rule, nothing above a PG when we were kids. I remember we rented The Garbage Pail Kids, Howard the Duck, too many times.
Yeah, two pretty awful movies, but them kind of films which you keep going back to, kind of hoping that they're not as bad as last time you remembered. I want it to be good.
I've never gone back.
Not even Howard the Duck?
No, I found a version of Garbage Pail Kids and I got halfway through it.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. So do you still collect to this day? Because we first actually got in touch through, you actually bought a VHS from me. So do you actually collect, or was that a one-off?
I do collect. I have to be strict with myself, so otherwise, I'd be in trouble. But I collect presets, occasionally sort of some 90s big box X rentals. And I've been dipping into a bit of European cinema, so getting some original Italian sell-through videos.
So when did music kind of first hit you? Was that before you went to university? Was you big into music?
I was always big into music, and I've been listening to your interview with Ken Stringfellow and listened to how his parents' record collection influenced him, and thinking back to actually what were the key albums that I found in my parents' record collection. I think 20 Golden Greats, the Beach Boys. My dad had that LP and cassette, Queen Greatest Hits 2, and things like that. Sort of big produced pop songs hooked me immediately. But I think it was late into my teens, and probably through getting into the kind of music chat rooms online, sort of in the infancy of bulletin boards and things like that, discovering about bands that really weren't that much older than me at the time. And that sort of got me thinking, well, actually, perhaps this is something we can do, it's possible.
What were some of those bands which you kind of latched onto?
So initially Ash, I think, was the first band, a couple of years older than me, probably my brother's age. And I remember my brother coming back from Reading Festival, 95, I think, and I waited for him.
I was at that one. That's the only Reading festival I've been to.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, so he's 2.5 years older than me. So he was allowed to go to Reading Festival first, and I wasn't. So I was so excited. I'd listened to it on the radio and taped my favorite bands from that year, but I waited for him to get back just to find out what it was like. Because, we grew up in the Isle of Wight. There was, at that time, there were no music festivals. Obviously now they have them. But so I waited for him and he came up the hill to our house and said, what was it like? And he was like,
totally different person.
He'd become cool in my eyes anyway. And he said, I saw this band and they've got a song about Jackie Chan. And I said, that's incredible. A song about Jackie Chan. He said, yeah, and they're called Ash. And I'd heard of Ash because I heard the Uncle Pat single from my cousin had played me that. So I was kind of aware of it. But then they became just like my favorite band for a few years.
Was Ash like the first big band which you're obsessed over then, do you think? Because they were one of the bands that kind of really cracked the UK market.
Massive, absolutely massive. They crossed over as well, didn't they? Sort of, they were on the cover of Melody Maker and they were on the cover of Just 17. So, they kind of really crossed over. So yeah, probably the first band that I needed everything that they did, all the singles, and tried to learn the songs, as best I could.
Every song was just had a massive chorus every time.
Huge, yeah. And they wrote those songs when they were kids.
Yeah, they were like crazy young when they first came out, because that was kind of an angle that the press jumped onto, really. So what was they, like 16, 17 years old or something?
I believe so. I think Girl from Mars must have come out when they were doing their A-level. So that gave me the impression that actually this is possible. Was
guitar your first instrument?
It wasn't. No, drums was my first instrument. I found a drum kit one day in the music department and no one didn't even know it existed, and that was it. He couldn't drag me away from it. And my music teacher got me some drum lessons. Thank you so much. Found a drum teacher especially to come in and give me weekly lessons. So I did all the rudiments and did all the grades and things like that.
And how old was you at this point?
I think I was 10 years old.
Wow, man.
Yeah, when I started doing the drum thing. Then I moved to senior school, and another kid joined the school, and he was a better drummer than me. So the guys I was jamming with said, well, sorry, he's better than you. You're out of the band. So I got kicked out of the band, 11 years old. But they said, you can be the singer. So I thought, maybe I can do that.
And this is all on the Isle of Wight at this point?
Absolutely.
So was you all kind of listening to similar stuff, or was it a bit of a free-for-all?
Sort of, yeah. So the guitarist that we still plays in Stayawakes, and our guitarist, even in the school days, his name's PJ Falk. Some people listening might put two and two together, and the name Falk and the Isle of Wight. His father and uncle put together the first Isle of Wight pop festivals in the 60s and early 70s. So he kind of came from this background, rock and roll background, and he could play guitar and piano and far better than I could. So I thought, stick around with this guy. He's going places.
So what's the bit about you guys having a rivalry prior to being a band together?
That's absolutely true. Yeah, so we didn't hang in the same friendship circles. He was friends with the tough kids. I definitely wasn't. So I remember on a school trip, we went to France on a school trip, and PJ and his friends bust down our hotel door room and wrecked the place, some heinous acts. So yeah, we didn't get on initially.
Was it just music which kind of pulled you together?
Of course, the music thing. So I think we needed each other because I was tinkering with the songwriting, and so he thought, well, if this guy's writing some lyrics and he's up for singing, then maybe we can make a go of it. And we're still doing that to this day.
Was you in the band Day of the Fight?
Yes, that's right.
And you stayed together all the way. That's amazing, really, for all that time.
Incredible. We live in the same city now, so Pete's in Southsea as well.
The Stayawakes are listed as being from like Portsmouth. Is that kind of in the ballpark?
Yeah, so Southsea and Portsmouth are close. It's the same place, essentially. Southsea is just on the sea, and Portsmouth's a bit, obviously, wider. But yeah, Portsmouth, Southsea, yeah.
And how did you end up locating there? Was that through university?
It was. So I started a course over in Portsmouth when I was a little bit older. I was 21, and I tried university before, and I was just too immature. And I ended up going back home and, with my tail between my legs, really, and very broke. But I gave it another shot when I was 21, and so glad I did, because I met our drummer, Steve, the first day I went to Portsmouth to find somewhere to live. We went to the student union, and I said, does anyone play drums? And he didn't initially say yes. So it was his friend. He said he does. And I said, right, well, let's hang out. Let's do something. I moved to Portsmouth really to find people that wanted to play music. It wasn't happening on the Isle of Wight because it was difficult to get off and get anything started. And there were gigs happening, but I figured that I needed to move off the Isle of Wight to get anything really going.
We're kind of jumping about a little bit, but you got into the band Ash. What kind of other bands? Did you gravitate to American bands as well then? Because you mentioned Ken Stringfellow. I've seen you mention the Posies before. Was the American music something that attracted you?
Not initially. I was more interested in sort of what was going on in the UK scene. Bands like Midget and Snug, Symposium were about at that time, thinking sort of around 96, 97. And then they were all kind of kids, basically, teenagers. So I found that sort of scene quite exciting just because it felt like, they're my age and they're doing it for real. So every time I could scrape enough money for a train fare and a boat, over to the mainland and get up to Camden Town and go and see some gigs, I would do that, and I would try and do that sort of once a month.
Yeah, that's a pretty undertaking to have to do all that. That's not like getting the bus or the taxi into your local town.
That's right.
Proper got to plan that stuff.
Yeah, and it was made possible through bulletin boards. I said, there was the Ash bulletin board, and I made some sort of lifelong friends really through that, and would hook up in Camden and just saw another world. Meeting up in the Good Mixer or the Dublin Castle was a big one at that time in Camden. Yeah, I was introduced to this other world and just thought, I never want to leave.
Can you remember the first gig you went to?
Yeah, so I went to see a band called Burst at the Dublin Castle. They were around, I suppose, 96, 97, 98 they were going. And that was through somebody who I'd met on the Ash board. They just said, this is my boyfriend's band, come and check it out. And they were great. And I'm still in touch with members of that band and still around today. Then I saw Midget at the same venue, Dublin Castle, and they would just release Welcome Home Jelly Bean, if anyone remembers that, where the audience would hurl jelly beans at the band during that song. That was a thing. And it's amazing. That would never happen today. Kids would load up with jelly beans and just pelt the band during the song. I remember going to the shop to get some jelly beans to launch at them.
It was a rite of passage when you went to see them. I love it. I'd never even heard that before. I remember the band, but I never heard that story. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you had the band Day of the Fight in 2001. Was that kind of a contrast to what the Stayawakes are doing and more reflective of the music of the time?
If I rewind a little bit, we were initially called Millhouse, and that started on the Isle of Wight, which was very much punk pop, not dissimilar to bands like Snug or Gel or Midget. We were trying to sort of do something similar.
First thing you do in your band, try and copy who you're listening to.
Then Day of the Fight was more of a collaborative thing where influences from Steve, our drummer, he's more into the hard rock, Wild Hearts, Therapy, that kind of thing. So it became sort of heavier just from Steve playing the way he plays. And then obviously PJ was involved, and he's sort of more into post rock and more kind of techie stuff. So that all that sort of melded bothered and became Day of the Fight, which kind of was more of a post-hardcore emo thing. Yeah, we got kind of lumped in with the emo rock.
How long was that band together for?
Probably doing stuff up until like 2008. So, sort of 7 years.
Did you do much touring around and stuff?
Yeah, we did. We got out quite a lot, and all DIY bookings around the country. We made a sort of network of bands and people, and we just booked our own tours, booked like a month's worth of tours, and we'd just go out in a van, and that was it, and just did DIY shows. Yeah.
Was you kind of juggling day jobs?
So we were studying at that time. Then at some point, we kind of all took a break from studies and said, well, we'll give this a shot. And we set up on the Isle of Wight. We set up a little recording studio with a tape machine to try and offset some of the costs. So we'd record local bands and stuff like that cheaply. And then we'd do a bunch of bands, and then we'd book a tour, and that would sort of pay for the tour.
What kind of brought that band to a finish? Had it just kind of run its course?
It kind of had. We'd done a DIY album. We'd put that out. So PJ was going back into finishing off his degree, his architecture degree. And the two other guys, Steve and our friend Dave, now lives in New Zealand, they were going back to their studies. And I was working in a music venue, and I sort of wasn't really keen to go back to my studies. And I thought, done that.
After Day of the Fight finished, how long was it before you kind of started putting the pieces together for the Stayawakes?
Probably towards the end of that, I'd been doing some solo gigs just to kind of pass the time and keep active and playing and writing and things like that. So I got a chance to go out on tour with Kenneth Ishak from Beeswax. Interestingly, Beeswax were produced, one of their albums, their second album, South of Boredom, produced by Ken Stringfellow in Norway. And so became friends with the singer. I had an opportunity to go out with him on a solo tour around the UK, which I also drove. And that was a pretty lonely experience. I just sort of didn't enjoy the solo thing. I guess sometimes if you get the right atmosphere, it's great, but I missed the band thing. So as soon as I could get the guys back in a room, I did, and said, right, now's the time. So Day of the Fight pretty much morphed into the Stayawakes.
How have your music taste changed then over this time? Day of the Fight was lumped into all the pop punk and a little more heavier kind of stuff, but obviously the Stayawakes, when I first heard it, I was like, holy shit, why have I not heard of this band before? Because this is right up my street with just like really melodic power pop, which I say it reminds me of a lot of like 90s alternative pop bands, really. To me, it's got that kind of sound. So how had your music taste changed during this time?
Put it this way, our first songs we jammed together was Superchunk, Hyper Enough, and Posey's Daily Mutilation.
Where had you heard the Posies? Because, I mean, they never really broke massive in the UK. I found them through, like, word of mouth.
Okay, so I was, just by chance, used to tape loads of stuff off TV when I was a kid. And I taped an episode of The Beat, if you remember that, with Gary Crowley. Used to be on ITV, sort of in the early hours. And one particular episode, 94, had Phoenix Festival and the Posies playing Solar Sister. And I kid you not, that to this day, I say that was the time where my ears opened up to something new, I think, when I heard Posies play Solar Sister on that TV show. That song just blew my mind. The possibilities of doing that kind of melodic, heavy music, but with the harmonies. So yeah, that was back in 94. So obviously that stuck with me. And I eventually got hold of the albums, got hold of Frosting on the Beta and later Amazing Disgrace. So yeah, Posey's massive, absolutely massive for me. And Superchunk, things like Death Cab for Cutie, I think we were all sort of listening to that as well.
Was there ever kind of like a discussion, like sat down and say, right, this band's going to be different from the last one. Let's kind of mold it a little bit in this? Or was that just where your songwriting was going? So it was inevitable that had happened?
I needed to get the band back together and people excited about it. So I just tried to write a song which I thought encompassed some of those, things I liked about those American bands really, but also write like a big kind of chorus that would sort of hook people in and get people be excited about playing music in a room again. So I wrote a song called Keepsakes, which sounded completely different in the sort of demo version. So that was the first song I sort of said, I think this is the kind of direction that maybe we can take this in.
And what's been kind of like the progress of the band since you first started? You've had the first album out. Was you together long before that album came out?
That came out through Bad Horror in London. Ellis and Holly, our friends, put that out for us amazingly. It took a little bit of time, to be honest with you, and a bit of a lineup change. So we had a different bass player initially who really wasn't really into touring or the idea of doing it sort of more than meeting once a week and just having a beer and a jam, really. So he didn't stick around. And our friend Jimmy was from the Isle of Wight. He was totally into it.
And he brought songs as well?
Yeah, he brought songs. All our pre-production, so he recorded a lot of the album at his home studio.
How'd you go about with choosing singles? Because you've released singles with both of you singing. Is it a tough call?
It hasn't really been. I think there's been songs that we all felt were the strongest ones at the time. So we just pushed them forward. It was all very good natured.
Who drops all like the pop culture references in, obviously like the name of the first album had a Ghostbusters link to it. And is the name of the band based on horror films at all? But I didn't know if it was Nightmare on Elm Street influenced or just in horror films in general.
Before, obviously, the band came together, I was trying to think of a name. Day of the Fight came from a Stanley Kubrick documentary. So we had that film reference thing going on. Stayawakes came, I was watching a lot of 80s slashers. I think I was watching a Sleepaway Camp, and I watched the first 3 of those.
How fun was that? Was it fun or was it a bit of a slog?
I'd never seen them. So, and also like Silent Night, Deadly Night. I watched that and the sequels to that. So I was just in that frame of mind. And Stayawakes it sounded like it could be a slasher movie.
It's great, man.
And the Nightmare on Elm Street reference.
I'm pretty sure your Christmas song, it's the only Christmas song to name check Police Academy for. Any reason for that particular entry in the series?
I don't know if it's the biggest grossing one. Probably not. It was the one with all the skateboarding, wasn't it?
That's right. I knew you were going to go there. I knew it.
And I think I had the quad poster somewhere, so we thought we were going to get that in the video.
Was it a collaboration with the reference points for that Christmas song?
So we all took a verse. So I got the bridge part, which I was quite happy with. I didn't really have anything prepared. Jimmy sings the first verse. Pete, our guitarist, who really doesn't sing on anything, he does a few backing vocals. He took the second verse, and his lyrics are great. Yeah, like WWE wrestling in there. I think Macho Man Randy Savage is name checked. Status Quo, we got them in.
Several snooker players, I think, are in there at some point.
Right. Yeah, Ronnie O'Sullivan. So we had great fun writing that.
Was it a journey to eBay to get all the different bits, or was it stuff you all had in your own collections?
We got a friend who, Jimmy says, lives in the past, which is kind of mean.
I'd get on with him.
He had the figures. He has a lot of wrestling figures, so that was sorted. And I think he had the VHS as well of the Fawlty Towers. Yeah, he lent us a load of stuff.
Because you've even got like an old episode of EastEnders going on in the background, I think.
That's right. Yeah, the Christmas episode, 92, I think.
So good.
I am surprised no one's mentioned that yet.
Yeah, Gillian Telforth's there in the background.
Yeah, and it was when Arthur was having it away with the having the affair, wasn't it?
We'll try and get a bunch of views back on the Christmas single now in February, something like that. If you could time travel back to have one of your songs in a specific 80s movie, is there one you could pick? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I should have emailed you that question beforehand.
We'd all have different answers, I think. St. Elmo's Fire or Karate Kid 3, maybe.
Why Karate Kid 3?
Yeah, not a popular choice, but it's so ridiculous, Karate Kid 3. You know, Ralph Macchio is pushing 30, possibly in that one, you know, and dare I say it, kind of, you know, not as trim as he used to be in the first two.
I think somebody pointed it out to me, like that Karate Kid 3 is supposed to be set probably only like a year or 2 years, or probably a year after the first one or something. So there's just like this massive growth spurt in him.
Didn't question it at the time, but, you know.
No.
So maybe Karate Kid 3 just because of the ridiculous nature of it. You know, he's the one who falls out with Miyagi, doesn't he, in 3?
Well, you're not going to compete with there's no room on the soundtrack to Karate Kid 1. It's chock full of hits anyway.
That's right. Exactly. You got to choose another one.
Do you have a favourite movie soundtrack of your own? What's your go-to?
Ooh, do you know what? This is going to sound really pretentious, but I've been listening to loads of Eurocrime soundtracks. The films with Franco Nero and Maurizio Merli. I've been listening to loads of those Italian soundtracks.
Right.
And that's what I've been listening to lately. I find myself just kind of listening to that kind of funky stuff.
Because isn't the new single, Please Steve Just Drive, the video for that, is that based on like a Eurocrime kind of vibe?
That was the intention. So we had the Italian subtitles going on, and the font we chose is like the font that all those Eurocrime movies and the Giallo movies have, that big yellow font. I asked the guy who directed it, can you reproduce that somehow? So he had a good crack at doing that.
Where did you shoot it, the video?
Oh, it's shot in just like a factory, just in the downtime. So we did it at night after they closed, drove the car in. I set up my home projector, showing the driving footage, and away we went.
Yeah, it works great, man.
Very DIY.
Because was that song written way back around the Day of the Fight time, or was it just after there? Was that one of the first songs you wrote after? So it's quite an old song, which has been resurrected.
It really is. It's one I've had knocking around for ages. It was written at the end of Day of the Fight. It's about Day of the Fight, really. It's about a drive we did from Middlesbrough to Southampton Joiners to play a gig. And Steve got behind the wheel of the van. And I remember texting our bass player, Dave, thinking, you know, he's going too fast. Like, I wasn't feeling great at all. And yeah, that's how the song came about. It's kind of reflective, the lyrics. I guess it was around the time of the end of the band and I was going back home, about the end of a tour. When you go back home, got to my parents' house where I was living at the time, and there was no one there. And it was silence. You come back from a tour, it's like noisy, crazy, everyone's having fun. And you go back home, and I just had to switch all the lights on in the house. I was kind of feeling a bit down, I think. And it's about that, really. It's about the end of an era, I suppose, of that band.
What's took it so long to get to this point to be recorded? Is it one which has been kind of in the set?
I think it was because I was a little bit apprehensive about playing it to the guys, just because it does name check people. And I thought, oh, maybe I don't know how they feel about that. So I just used to just play it, to myself, really, and had it in the back pocket. So one day I just said, I've got this song. It's really old. What do you think? And Jimmy was the first one. Was like, I love that chorus. We should do it. And I'm really proud that it was chosen as a single, and it's out there now.
Who's put the new album out? Is this with a different label to the last album?
It is. So Holly and Ellis from Bad Horror just weren't in a position where they could really finance it. So we had an offer from Engineer Records to put it out. Sort of said, great. So it's coming out on Engineer Records, who have a sister label in the States as well. And so a lot of US bands and bands around the world. So, it's going to hopefully open sort of a few avenues for us to go out and tour, when all this is over.
Is there anybody which you would like to tour with who you think would be a good match? I mean, any tour right now would be nice, but...
There's some bands around the UK I think we'd like to go out with. There's a band in the Northeast called Bear Away, like kind of gruff punk rock. I'd like to go out with them. We were really lucky when we did the first record. We got to play with Beeswax. I mentioned them earlier, Beeswax from Norway. We got to go and do a few dates with them around the UK, which was incredible. They're one of my favourite bands.
Is there any plans for any more singles or anything like that?
We have got another video in the can.
You guys are relentless.
Which we did last summer. So yeah, last year was video year. So we spent a lot of time on the beach shooting videos. So we got a summer sort of hot video, which will be out, and it was all shot on Hailing Island Beach. If anyone knows, that's pretty nice place.
Great stuff. Dude, well, thank you ever so much for having a chat with us.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thanks for selling me that ex-rental copy of Clockwork Orange that, brought us together. Just thanks so much, and all the best in what you're doing.
Nice one, man. Well, keep us posted with everything. Keep in touch, and I look forward to hearing the album.
Thanks, Rob.
No worries. Alrighty, mate. Well, you take care. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks so much to Andrew Ricks from the Stayawakes for taking the time to chat to me here on the Straight to Video podcast. I'm excited for when this whole pandemic eases up and we can go to live shows again, as the Stayawakes are certainly high on my list of bands I want to see. If you enjoyed the sound of the band, then please check them out at thestayawakes.com, and you can also find them on YouTube, where you can see some of their killer videos, and they really do put out some quality content on there, so please stop by. I want to thank you guys for choosing to listen to and supporting the Straight to Video podcast. I know I've been teasing a few things in the pipeline, but I'm close to getting those out there, and there's also been a rush of great chats with people I've reached out to recently on the way. And I'm also going to be talking to a few of my favourite podcast hosts in the next couple of weeks too, so hopefully you'll enjoy those and find another show to add to your list. But until then, thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to having you on board again real soon.